Title: Update: AITA for kicking a friend out of my house for what she said. Original post: It's been a few weeks since the situation happened, so I will start off by saying that ex-friend B did not apologize to friend A for what she said. Matter of fact, she hasn't reached out to either one of us since then. We also didn't reach out to her. Unfortunately, B's words from that day really got to friend A. She struggled with survivor's guilt and questioned her upbringing, lifestyle, views on religion, etc. She doubled her therapy sessions and I spent my free time keeping her company. A couple of weeks ago, I went over to her place and found her reading a Bible and almost obsessively flagging pages. She said she was researching to check if what B told her was true. She started reading excerpts and telling me her interpretations. This behavior did scare me a bit, so I suggested she bring this up to her therapist. It was the only thing I could think of to help calm her down. She did talk to the therapist, who suggested she perhaps talk to a pastor instead of trying to come up with her own conclusions. She asked me to go with her, which I did, but told me to just wait for her at the church while she talked to the pastor privately. After, she said that she felt better and was more convinced that B was full of it. She also seemed calmer, so I believed that conversation did help her. I was at her house on Friday and she told me that she still thinks about what was said and, although she feels much better after talking to the pastor, he's only one person and what if he is wrong? I tried to reassure her again and talk through her feelings, but I could tell it was still eating at her. I had a feeling she might spiral again. Then I had an idea. I told her about the post I made on here and explained why, how it works, etc. She's not a Reddit user. I pulled up my original post and asked her to read the comments to show her how hundreds of people, religious and non-religious, felt about what was said. We spent the evening reading each comment. She cried, she laughed, she was surprised and overwhelmed at the amount of support and reassuring words from all these strangers. I could tell she was more and more relieved as we read. Title: AITA for uninviting my family from my wedding because they want me to share it with my sister. To preface this, we only got engaged about 10 weeks ago and have plans for November 2021, but if there's still issues at the time we'll postpone. My sister, Rosie, and I have always had a complex relationship, but my bigger problem is her fiancé, Mick, who I detest with my entire being. Mick is like a caricature of the phrase, toxic masculinity. One time my daughter, age 7, painted my son, age 5, and my fiancé's nails, and Mick called my son and fiancé sissies because they had nail polish on. He's also hit on me in the past and slut-shamed me. So yeah, hate him. Fiancé also hates him. My parents wanted to invite all about 40 people to our wedding. Our guest list only 20 guests, so the agreement we came to was they pay for 2/3 RDS of the wedding as they had 2/3 RDS of the guests. So far all we have arranged is a venue, and it's a good thing we did, too, because there's only 3 venues in the area and November 2021 was the earliest date any of them had available. Rosie and Mick got engaged last week. Rosie has looked for venues and the first available date is April 2022. Mom and Dad told us today that we will now be having a double wedding. Everyone involved is aware of the issues we have with Mick. We refused to share the wedding. My parents then they were paying for 2/3 RDS of it, so they should have final say. I responded that they don't get a say on who is getting married. They said I was being immature and should learn to share the spotlight, and I said that my issue was seeing Mick standing next to my fiancé at the altar. My parents tried to, young lady, me, I'm nearly 28, saying that Rosie can't get anything in the next 18 months and it wasn't fair to make her wait that long, plus if they're paying for well over half the wedding and won't be interfering on anything else, we should allow this. I then said that we would pay for the entire wedding ourselves, and go back to our original guest list minus my parents, Mick and Rosie, then hung up. I definitely just snapped in the moment, but the idea of sharing my wedding with Mick gives me a visceral negative reaction. Since hanging up, my fiancé says that he's fine with this development, though he wasn't expecting it, but he supports me. However, my parents and sister feel I overreacted and called me an ass for uninviting them over them having one thing they wanted at the wedding they're paying for. I felt pretty confident in my choice, but then my brother, who hates Mick as much as we do, said I needed to calm the fuck down and that the logical response here would have been to return my parents' money and remove their guests, not to uninvite my parents from my wedding entirely, and said unless I fix it, I'd be going full bridezilla. Title: AITA for making my daughter get her own place after getting pregnant. My daughter, 25, has always wanted kids. She's just been that type of person. I also knew that she said she'd do it alone if she needed to, but did say she'd wait until 30. She just graduated from a master's program and got her first 9-to-5, well-paying job, so she's been living with us to save for a house. Well, the other day she sat me down and gave me a bag. Inside was a framed ultrasound that read, "Grandpa." I was flabbergasted. I asked how, because she's a lesbian. She said she found an app where you can get men to donate sperm for free or low cost. She said she found one, used a dropper of some sort, all done at an Airbnb. She assured me he got an STD panel and that his only contribution was sperm. Here's the thing. Our house is small. We have a room for my daughter, a room for me and my wife, and then an office for me since IWFH. After talking about it with my wife, we told her she had 9 months to move out. I said I'd support her emotionally, but I don't want a baby here. She said they'd share a room. I said she shouldn't have tried to conceive while under our roof and that had it been an accident, I'd be more willing to let her stay, but she did it on purpose. She can afford rent elsewhere, she just wants to save money. She broke down crying and said she thought we'd be happy. She hasn't spoken to us since. Title: AITA for telling my girlfriend to live with the decision she made. Me and my GF, Autumn, fake name obviously, had our child 8 months ago. We were college students before the baby and are college students now. We weren't and still aren't rich, but before the baby we were relatively comfortable. We had to struggle a few times, but we could pay our bills on time, and put food on the table. We didn't have to panic at the end of every month, basically. Also, I used protection. When we found out Autumn was pregnant, she seriously considered whether or not she wanted an abortion. She would always speak to me about it, but wouldn't really care for my opinion any time I tried to offer it. I was okay with that, because it's her body and she should choose what she wants. When she finally did ask, however, I gave her my honest opinion. I told her that I love her and will support whatever decision she makes, but we simply don't have any money to support a baby. And if she chooses to have the baby, we'll be struggling, badly. Fast forward a few months later and she's permanently decided she wants to keep the baby. I supported her, obviously. It's now been 8 months and 2 days since the birth of my daughter. The problem here is that, every other day she complains and lets it be known she wouldn't have chose to have our baby if she knew we would be in such a financial situation. Finally, after 8 months, I got fed up. I told her, the facts are you chose to have a baby, and you're not gonna say every day how you regret having her. Be a grown-up and live with the decision you made. She responded by telling me how I chose to have a baby with her too and how I need to support her. Basically she started yelling and I just took our daughter and left. It's been a few days since this happened, and she has said multiple times she doesn't think she's wrong. I really just want a third opinion. Title: AITA for being upset when my husband took my book and refused to give it back till I make him dinner. I, 24F, study pediatrics and it's been the hardest year of medical school. It's physically and mentally exhausting. I began working at an outpatient clinic from 8A-5P. I'm currently studying for NBME. With little time I try to study during lunch break, and in the evening when I get home and after I make my husband a meal. I'm 14 weeks pregnant and it's incredibly exhausting studying hard for the upcoming exam, and I can barely find the time between the clinic, studying and self-care. I use the past year papers and learn about the type of topics in those papers and read as much as I can, plus going through textbooks and summarizing and taking notes. My husband, M27, has been getting a little demanding lately, and I noticed that especially after I started preparing my exam, I spend time studying in the bedroom. he'd come in and ask me to take some time to make him dinner. I'd make him dinner, then go back to studying. Then after he finishes, he'd knock on the door and ask me to do the dishes. I'd get frustrated because he won't do the dishes and knows that I have no time for washing the dishes, and then he'd take a shower and leave the bathroom wet, causing me to take time to clean it up. Then he'd tell me to go study elsewhere because he wanted to sleep. I study in the kitchen sometimes, in the living room when he's sleeping. In the morning before I go to work, I'd wait for him to wake up to mail him coffee and then leave at 8:30, which is a bit late. He wanted to invite his family for dinner, but I told him I was busy studying. He got mad at me for that and said that I needed to do more around the house, but I do what I can trying to manage. Last night, he got home at 10 p.m. He came into the room wanting me to make him dinner. He got upset when I told him it was way past dinner time and wanted me to make him something to eat. I told him there was leftovers in the fridge that he can eat, but he wanted me to cook. My exam was approaching and I needed every minute to be able to study as much as I can. We started arguing. He said he got fed up with my treatment and took my book, said I'd get it back once I make him dinner. I was so angry with what he did, I demanded the book back and told him to stop acting so selfishly and ruin my career. He lashed out that he was working all day as well and didn't have a decent meal. We argued back and forth. He gave it back and went to the other room. He made himself a sandwich and went to sleep. Before leaving for work, he said that I was treating him poorly and that I need to take care of him more and not ignore him like that. He demanded that I apologize for last night, but I didn't.